right, so here we go with Module 14B, Lab 29. We're looking at arthropods still, and let's start with class Arachnida.
Oh, yeah, nice one.
Arachnida. All right, so who are the arachnids?
Spiders.
Correct. So they have 4 pair of walking legs, so 8 legs. They have a fused head and thorax called the cephalothorax. Remember that from last time. 4 pair of simple eyes, 8 of them. We looked at those a little bit last time. I showed you a couple pictures. No antennae like insects have. And they have this special type of respiration through a process known as book lungs. Many have spinnerets and produce silk, but not all of them.
Yes, I want to.
You weren't supposed to fill any of this out?
No, you are. Yes, you fill this out.
Oh, okay. Then write that down in there. So you're 5. There should be 5 blanks.
Yes.
Okay. So that we have spiders. The ones that don't make webs are called stalking spiders. And so they will stalk and pounce on their prey. And the most famous would be obviously this guy. All right, so that's a tarantula. And we have those around here. You can find them fairly easily. They are terrifying looking up close. I have one to take a look at today. We'll take a look at it. It's dead. No, it's dead. But they turn out that they're not very aggressive. So you could have them crawl on you and this kind of thing. But if you look at their mouth parts, yikes! There's their eyes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, 6, 7, 8 back there on the back of their head. We can't really tell from that picture all those eyes, but you can see those mouth parts, and you'll see it close up today. These are some pretty massive fangs. All right, because they will attack their prey. And I think this is a video here. We're going to see somebody put like something in there like a cricket. There we go. There you go. Yeah. So the people do keep them as pets.
Yeah, that's like watching.
I don't know. Okay, here comes the poor cricket. Oh. All right, so they stalk them. So, but we have our web spiders, the more classical ones right here. Most spiders will trap their prey by using some sort of a web. Spider silk is flexible, yet very strong and sticky. These look like they have blanks to fill in, yeah?
I think it's the second one. The fun facts thing?
What now?
Is that fun facts? Or spider silk fun facts.
I guess so.
Webs.
There's a blank. Spider silk is flexible. There's not a blank for you?
There's like 3 blanks that says spider silk fun facts, and I'm guessing it's
flexible, strong, and sticky. Okay, there you go. I should put up their fun facts.
Like spider, the web types is gonna be like patterns. Or
yeah.
There are several types of webs, and I'm going to write them down so I don't lose track. We have the orb, sheet, tangle, and my favorite, the trapdoor.
So yeah.
All right, so I'm just going to show you examples of them. So I wanted to have them in the right order there. Webs are engineering marvels, and it's true. We'll watch a little video on that. Okay, so this is an orb type, so the classic type of spider web that the spider, weaves it from here and then goes concentrically out like this. Here's an actual one there. So we see those all the time, yeah, okay? And we're going to see from our video why it's very important that they have these little water droplets in there that help them to stretch. This is the sheet. We see these very commonly as well, so there's a spider out there in your yard, and it forms it so it has a little canopy. And here in the morning you can see it's collected the dew, and it's much more visible when it has the dew on it. We have the tangle, which seems to have no real any kind of design. It's just a tangle of it. It looks like it's on the side of a tree right here or something like that, but very sticky and would catch the bugs walking up this tree. And here's the trap door, which is my favorite. The critters down here, I have a couple of, we're going to look at the spider web video, and then I have a couple of examples of the trap door. So let's watch this.
But if you think the bridge is a masterpiece of structural engineering, then up here you'll find an engineering miracle. The spider's web, one of nature's oldest and most successful designs. Unchanged in over 100 million years, as a trap, it still works a treat. So what's the secret of the web's design? First, the spider spins the spokes and outline, giving her web strength. Then she turns back on herself, using a particularly sticky silk to weave a lethal trap for any passing insects. It's like watching a master architect at work. With her work done, she leaves a free zone at the hub and waits. But where does all that silk come from? Here in Oxford, there's a group of scientists willing to go to extreme lengths to find out. Once they've caught one, they then have to milk it.
She's okay.
Without hurting it, the scientist can pull up to 700 meters of silk from the spider in one continuous strand. But to discover why the silk is so strong, we need to have a closer look at the spider itself. At 12,000 times magnification, a whole new world is revealed. Here on the spider's abdomen are 4 organs known as spinnerets. Each of them is dotted with lots of mobile, finger-like protrusions called spigots, which make liquid silk just a few thousandths of a millimeter thick. The spider pulls threads of it from the spigots, turning the liquid silk into a solid, and twisting several strands together to give the thread strength. Each spider can produce several different types of silk from their spinnerets. From sticky sheets used to wrap the victim, to an incredibly strong single thread. A strength which is completely disproportionate to its scale. Each fine strand is just 1/30th the thickness of a human hair, but if it was as thick as a pencil, it could tow an ocean liner with ease. But the genius of the web lies not just in its super strong thread, but in how that thread is used. And that secret lies in the water droplets at every junction. Inside each droplet, strands of web are tightly curled. Scientists believe that when a fly slams into it, these strands unravel, allowing the web to flex and stretch without breaking. industry has already learned from some of the spider's tricks. We may not be able to spin it from our abdomens, but when it comes to producing strong threads, we're catching up with the spiders all the time.
All right, by using steel, apparently, yeah. Okay, so here's our trapdoor spider. You can see someone's lifted up the little trapdoor right there, and we're going to see here comes a unsuspecting victim. And there's the door. Got it. Yeah, and then closes it back up. Yeah, so it just disappears. Here's one that somebody opened. If you find one and you open the door, here's what the spider will do. You can see him down in there. Watch him. He goes up and he shuts it. So he likes to have his trapdoor closed unless he's gonna catch something. So they're pretty cool. I like those guys. Okay, so the anatomy of a spider. Remember, we have our cephalothorax, or head and thorax together right here, and a large abdomen. We saw on that web spinner had a particularly large abdomen, and you've seen them before where some of them have really fat abdomens and others don't. And then look at this. Look at these things like our chalcera and the palps, the mouth things that are very similar to the crawdad that we looked at last week. And then we see our four legs here, and just, you know, pretty hairy on the legs to give them that friction to move around. All right, if we looked at the inside, I have tried to dissect a spider before. It's not easy to do. They're very small, and trying to get in here. Remember, they don't have an endoskeleton, they have an exoskeleton. So therefore, just like with anything else, including, I think, our crawdad last week, the external anatomy is really the more fascinating stuff. We're going to be looking at a grasshopper today, and really the most important part of it's going to be the external anatomy, and they're really disappointingly small. Normally you get them, they're nice and big. These guys are half that size, so I'm sad about that. I'm not sure, you know, it's just what they sent me this year. So, but you can see we have a large heart right here, and this is the interesting part here. This book lung, it's called. And then we have their mouth and guts and all that kind of stuff right here. Here's what the book lungs, they look like little pages in a book, and each one of those little pages has these little trachea in there which allow for oxygen exchange. All right, class Insecta. We're continuing with arthropods. The insects, of course, are the largest of the class. They are the most successful animal on the planet. There are more insects than anything else.
There are 2 lines that says 2 spiders to know and avoid.
Oh, 2 spiders to avoid?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't have that in there, huh? All right, that should have been in there as the black widow and the brown recluse. I can give you all the light back on. The black widow and the brown recluse. Those are the ones we have around here that are venomous. Yeah. Fortunately, yeah, they're not super. Well, when I say they're not super aggressive, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. The recluse is reclusive, but if you're getting out old wood pile or something like that, stuff out of wood pile, that's where you're going to find those brown recluse. Those, I think the brown recluse would be the one I'd be more nervous about, and I'd want to get myself to a hospital because they cause necrotic tissue to form where they bite you. So, all right, here's our class Insecta. Other classes we'll be looking at besides Insecta are the Chilopoda, or centipedes, and our Diplopoda are our millipedes. All right, I think that you have to write those ones down.
Yeah, there's 2 boxes. It's class, what is that word? Chilopoda?
Yeah, Chilopoda
And then
and Diplopoda.
There's like 2 boxes for that.
That must be those, yeah. These are the other classes, then we'll get to the insects. Yeah, so we have Chilopoda is our centipede, Diplopoda is our millipede. We have both of these around here as well. The centipede looks like this. These are, I wouldn't touch these, don't touch them. Stay away from these guys, they'll hurt you. They have some pretty good stingers on them. The way you can tell there is that when they call it centipede, centipede means 100, they don't have 100 legs, but they do have 1 pair of legs per segment. So you see a segment and a pair of legs, segment, pair of legs. Notice the segments look like they're fat and skinny, then fat and skinny, but each one does have a pair of legs coming off of it right there. And so we know that now when it comes to the millipede, also not 1,000 legs, but for every segment there are 4. So 2 on this side and 2 on that side. It's more difficult to tell here because they are so close together, these segments are, but there's 2 legs on this side and the other side, so 4 per segment. So the centipede has 2 per segment, the millipede has 4 per segment. And these are very common around here, and these are safe to hold. They don't hurt you, they'll crawl around you, and they're pretty cool. All right, now we'll move on to class Insecta. We're going to have our things to write down, yes, in a box somewhere. Characteristics, number 1, 3 pair of walking legs. Or jumping, and jumping, you could say. Two, usually have wings at some stage of their life. Maybe not the whole time, but at some stage. You think about ants, ants have it during the swarm time. And 1 pair of antennae. 3 segments, you already know this: head, thorax, abdomen.
That's it.
Okay. Insect wings, we have 4 types. Right here we have membranous wings. We'll find those on the fly. I think I'll end up showing you an example of each one of these as well. So membranous. Scaled wings are definitely moths and butterflies.
Are the fly
Yeah.
and the butterfly, are
Those
those
are the-
examples?
Those are examples. Leather-like wings, like the grasshopper. We'll see that today. And the horned wings, we have beetles and ladybugs. They have a special kind of a hard covering over their wings called an elytra that they flip open in order to extend their wings. You've probably seen that on a ladybug. All right, we have our 4 wings and our 4 examples. Okay, so here we are looking at our membranous wing right here. You can see that has they actually have names for a lot of these little things right here. These folds and these cells and margins and this kind of thing. So someone's done a lot of work to go and label each one of these parts of a wing right here. And you can see our angles over here, the apical, and it just gives us an idea of where everything is. And here's where it's joining onto the body, of course. The wings are very varied throughout the insect world. We know that, especially like think about a butterfly's wing, how one butterfly will look way different from another butterfly, and they can be very beautiful. They're called the scaled wings, right? So here we're looking, I guess, at a membranous wing. That looks like leather-like to me, but I think it's membranous. That's some sort of fly. I'm surprised I don't have any more. Okay. Insect eyes. Most insects have compound eyes that gather light stimuli from many directions. Their specialized eyes allow insects to see wide angles and quick movements. We talked about this a little bit last time, how each one of those little spots there are a separate little lens, right? So they bring all that information in. We spoke last time about how they don't move their head around, so they have this very good vision because of the shape of their eyes. So like this guy on the left right here, look how his eyes go all the way down like this. The spots that look like eyeballs, look like pupil or whatever, that's just an illusion. It's the way the light is kind of dancing off of that. It sort of has an iridescence to it. If you look really, really closely, you can see each one of those lenses. We have a sensory hair coming out of there, all right, that's helping to collect data, also giving sensitivity to the eyes. Here's a bee, and that's kind of interesting. You see his eyes, you can't see each one of those cells very well right there, but it's a good picture. So we think that we often say that they're looking through it like this, right? We see something like this. Many, many versions of whatever they're trying to focus on. But there's new research to show that instead of like this, that may be more like this. Have you ever seen that with TV sets and they have all the TVs together, but instead of having individual pictures, they make one big picture? There's some sort of computer program to do that. We think that might be how the insects are seeing. We don't know for sure. This is what we classically say it looks like in an insect's vision. So this is supposedly a wall that you could look through to give you an idea of how an insect sees. So this gives you a little better idea that sort of this not super focused, but yet definitely know where the item is, where this guy is. We can see him pretty well, but you can see each one of his. So that's definitely doing this version on the left, right? So like we say, it may not be true. We don't know. All right, insect mouthpieces. We have different types. We're going to see on our grasshopper today the chewing mouthpiece that is pretty freaky looking. We'll also see on our spider has an interesting mouth structure as well. Now, when we have an insect like this with a piercing, sucking mouth, can you think of one that has a piercing, sucking? A mosquito. This is the type of insect that is known as a bug. So technically, a bug has to have this mouthpiece right here, and so a mosquito is a bug. But a grasshopper is not a bug. But we don't get that technical about it. We have siphoning or proboscis right here. It unrolls like a straw. And a butterfly will use that to unroll it and sip nectar out of a flower. And then we have sponging. This is a housefly. They spit on your food. It's true. And they dissolve it and sponge it up. So if you eat your sandwich after a fly's been on it, you're eating some of that fly's spit. All right, we can see an ant right here. Notice it's got the mandibles coming out here. The mandibles are going to help to lead it into the mouth parts, which are right in there. So a chomping kind of a mouth. Here we can see the interesting mandibles on this creature. I think that might be a katydid. And even some polyps right here. Those are probably going to be helpful in tasting and smelling. And here's our grasshopper. Okay, so we have labrum, which means lip. Mandible is a jaw. Maxilla is the lower jaw. And then the labium down here for the lower lip. Right there. And we'll get to see those nice and close up. And once again, we have a beetle over here with the kind of crushing, grasping mouth part right there. All right, orders of Insecta. Here we go. I thought we'd see those butterfly wings at some point. So Lepidoptera is the order in Insecta, and it means scaled wings. And we know that, of course, that includes butterflies and moths. And we can see a close-up. You see why it's called scaled wings. If you've ever caught a butterfly and you hold it by its wings, you know that powdery stuff kind of wipes off onto your fingers. Those are the scales that come off on there, and it's not good. It kind of leaves the scales off. It's almost like taking scales off a fish, right? So it makes it where their flight won't be as successful. So you can probably recognize this one. It's a monarch butterfly, and these are actually making their way through the area right now. They're flying, it's the summertime, so they're flying to the north. They're going from Mexico where they overwinter, and now they're flying up to Canada, and they fly right through central Texas. And you can actually participate in the great monarch butterfly count. I've seen a few, and then we know there's a painted lady that looks a lot like the monarch. It turns out the monarch, the taste of a monarch is very bitter and nasty tasting, so the creatures don't like to eat them. Birds don't like to eat them. And so the painted lady has a very similar markings, and she does that in order to evade being eaten by birds because they think it's a monarch. It's a mimicry thing. This is called the Luna moth. All right, so moths and butterflies are different in the sense that a couple of differences. I don't guess we're going to go through those. That the moths tend to have feathery type antennae. They also, when they're at rest, leave their wings spread out down like this, showing off. Where a butterfly, when it's resting, you know this, they have their wings folded upward, right? And their antennae have a club at the end. They're kind of skinny with a club. Also, typically with a butterfly, the larval stage, which is a caterpillar, tends to be a regular looking caterpillar, whereas a moth caterpillar tends to be one of those fuzzy kind of caterpillars. So in the summertime when you see all those black fuzzy caterpillars crossing the road, they're probably a moth. All right, they do have the type of mouth that has the proboscis right there that unfolds, and it sips out like a straw the nectar of a flower, and in the process, notice it's picked up a bunch of pollen right here, so they're very good pollinators. The problem with these that are not quite as good as bees is because their larvae stage, their caterpillars eat plants, and so they're not great for plants, even though they're really good pollinators. Yeah, you can see here kind of a drawing of that. Here's one extending its proboscis into the flower right here and sipping that nectar. All right, order Hymenoptera. These are the bees. All right, they have membranous wings. They often have stingers, and they are considered social insects. So a social insect is an insect that gathers together in a colony.
Are we supposed to write this down?
Yeah, this is the class insect orders.
Yeah, your first order was Lepidoptera, and this is Hymenoptera. Lepidoptera were the butterflies and yeah, order Lepidoptera. Now we have Hymenoptera. And you could write next to it, the example would be bees. let's see, let's look at them as social insects. They live together in a colony, and we know this, a bee colony is called a hive, and we know that they have a queen, and these worker bees right here are all female, and they spend their lives tending to the queen, feeding her, and as she lays eggs, that's her job. All she has to do is eat and lay eggs, and they will take those eggs and they will hatch out into new bees. You can see this red little pink dot on her right here. That's the beekeeper has put a spot on her to identify her, just so we could see her from a distance. She is larger than the worker bees, but here she's not a ton larger, so he might get them mixed up if he didn't have a really good marker on her. I have a friend who raises bees, and you order the bees and they get delivered to you. Then you have to order the queen, and then they're gonna install her as the queen. But they've been fed something special, so they're bigger and
Royal jelly. We
yeah,
have
royal
bees.
jelly. You have bees. Now, so do you have them marked?
Mhm.
So this friend of mine, he was just brand new at doing it, and he was told that you could use fingernail polish, to put on. So he reached down with some fingernail polish to put it on her, and she moved, and he ended up putting the fingernail polish over her head, and it completely covered her head and suffocated her, sadly. So he fortunately had bought 2 queens in case there was a problem, so he was very careful the next time.
Isn't the thing that like if the other bees like don't accept the queen, they'll kill it?
They will, but typically they're pretty good at taking this in. So, because I know they sell them, I believe, separately.
Mhm.
Yeah. And then once you've established it, they will make a new queen later, but it takes time.
Most of the time when we introduce a new one, they don't care.
They just want to
They'll
serve.
get rid of that one and make a new one.
Yeah, so if the queen stops laying eggs, they'll get rid of her.
Yeah.
Worker bees are so busy, it's kind of interesting. They have this life cycle right here. So they hatch out, they just emerge, and for week 1, their job is to clean out the dirty honeycomb, and then they will graduate to feeding the larvae when they're about 1 week old. The food gets brought in by somebody else, and they feed it to them. And then they advance to building the honeycomb at 2 weeks. They're receiving the food, obviously, because they have to feed them here. Now this is to get ready to make honey. All right, then they graduate to becoming a guard. They're getting older at this point. But at the end, at 3 weeks, they forage for nectar, pollen, and water. So that's they're all trying to get that job of jobs. But then they die. They only have a lifespan of 5 to 7 weeks. That surprises me. But of course, new ones are hatching out all the time, and they're being replaced all that while. Okay, so we can see here the beehive geometry is pretty fascinating. That they build this, they don't really have hands. They have those little feet that they can move around, but they mostly use their mouth parts to chew on pollen and some of the nectar, and they make the beeswax. Yeah, and then they form these 6-sided chambers that are almost perfect. And it's difficult in nature to find things that are perfect, but these are real close to it. That they have these angles that are just right. And then of course these are being made for a purpose, and it depends on where they are in the hive. One of them, the purpose is for honey. One of them is for brood, the brood chamber. And so here we're going to see the brood chamber right here, where the egg is laid. Here comes the queen. She lays the egg inside one of the wax cells right here, and then here comes a worker who is feeding it. Once it's hatched out, right, and it feeds it till it gets really fat, and at a certain time, right here, they'll say it's time for metamorphosis. They will take wax and cover over the top of the cell right here. Then the magic happens, and then the adult leaves the cell coming out there after some metamorphosis takes place. So if you look at the juvenile right here, it looks like a caterpillar, and the adult looks like a bee, so you can see how it goes through complete metamorphosis, similar to what a butterfly goes through. It's just we don't get to see it. Not that we see what happens with a butterfly, but we do see that chrysalis form and stay there. Here, this is all happening down inside the hive. Here you can see a picture of somebody somebody's cut this open to show us these guys are a little younger right here, but you see that there's the cell right there. Here's these whiter ones are younger than these darker ones right here, but you can definitely see the body parts on there. Those are ready, very close to move out of the cell. I believe that they chew their way out themselves. All right, collecting nectar and pollen. It is true that when a bee goes out to find the nectar, they do choose one type of flower and one type of flower only. Unless they are killer bees. Killer bees are wild, and you can domesticate them. I know Mr. Johnson, who does the martial arts here, he collects killer bees and domesticates them. And they will go out and have like you could say wildflower. They'll go to any wildflower. But typically what a bee likes to do is to go find one particular flower, clover, let's say, or orange blossoms, or whatever it happens to be. She comes back to the hive and tells the rest of the hive where to find it by doing a little dance. You've probably heard of the waggle dance, and the way they move, it gives them the indication on, according to the sun at a certain time of the day, which way to fly to find these flowers. And then that way they end up making honey that's similar, and you can harvest honey that's been specifically from one type of nectar. You can see right here the honeybee. She's covered with pollen. That's her way of pollinating other flowers. They do use the pollen. Mostly they use the nectar, but they use the pollen as well. You can see they collect it on their little legs right here, and that's called a bee basket. And they pack it on there, and they use that to make the food, to make the royal jelly. So it's kind of a different way of making the food. Instead of just feeding the nectar to the queen, the one that will become the queen, they feed the nectar that has had this pollen added into it, a special treatment that they do for it. Oh, here's the waggle dance. So this tells the source, the direction of the food source, and they make a loop, and they dance around and wiggle their rear end. And according to the sun, they know which way the food source is. So it's pretty cool. Some people have studied this in great detail, and it turns out it's very sophisticated. Here are these little creatures with such sophistication. Another group of social insects are ants. Unfortunately, we have a lot of experience with these guys, namely the invasive type called the fire ant. You can see here we have our females, workers, right down here at the bottom. The male will only be around during spawning time when there's mating time. The queen, of course, has her wings. They live in a colony called a, what do you call those, ant mound? A mound, yeah. And so we can see down here, let's see, the queen, looks like the queen's here, laying the eggs. And then the workers will go and take the eggs to various locations to grow, and then they're hatching down here. And they'll feed the larvae down there, and then they will, of course, go through metamorphosis and become an ant. Right here is called the pantry, or the Brits would say the larder, and they have, not all of them do that, but they have some specialized ants here. We're going to see a video in just a minute that shows how we call those the honey pot ants, and they kind of keep them there for a kitchen, if you will. So here we see the queen, an egg. Here are the workers, adult workers here. Here are the reproductives that would end up being the winged male. Right here, winged female would become a queen. You see how they're much bigger. So they're fed differently so that they can develop the way they need to in order to fulfill their destiny over here. All right, the honeypot ants. I find these guys to be quite fascinating. It's just a regular ant, but the abdomen can be very distended. These little stripes on here are actually the part of the exoskeleton on the abdomen, and they've been stretched out because it's full with the nectar that's being stored by this critter. And they'll hang upside down like this. And what will happen is that the ants that want to come collect it will come and stroke the abdomen and get the honey from the honeypot, I believe, out of the honeypot's mouth, I believe. Let's see, the video probably will remind me. This is a great video. Attenborough.
In the lush forests of the tropics, where flowers bloom throughout the year, animals that feed on nectar can always find a drink somewhere. But in other parts of the world, where perhaps the winters are bitterly cold, or here in the parched deserts of Australia, where flowers only bloom after brief rains, animals that rely on nectar have to have some way of storing it to last them through the hard times. These mulga trees produce nectar on which ants feed, and they have the most extraordinary larders. The galleries of their nests lie 4 feet or so below the surface of the ground. These golden globes hanging from the roof are their storage pots, full of honey. Each one is alive, an ant with an abdomen expanded to the size of a grape. The small dark flecks are the hard plates which protect the body of a normal-sized ant. It's the membrane between them that is stretched. These bloated individuals are almost totally inactive, so they consume very little of the honey that they hold. It is drunk by the busy workers, who, when there's little food to be found above ground, come down here and induce the honeypots to regurgitate it. The workers also tend the swollen bodies, keeping them well groomed and clean. During the good times, the workers collect all the nectar they can and take it down to the larders to top up the colony's storage jars by feeding it to them, drop by drop. The people who've roamed these deserts for millennia, the Aborigines, have always valued these ants as one of their few sources of sugar, and they eat them just as they are. It's liquid, warm, and marvelously sweet.
Yeah, there you go. What about fire ants? So we have these around here, of course. And the question is, do they bite you or do they sting you? And the answer is yes. So what they will do is they have a very strong mandible right here. They'll actually bite you to get a hold of you, hold on to you. Then they'll use their abdomen to inject you with their venom. And the venom is acidic. And that acid comes into you, of course, and usually leaves these little pustules on you. They hurt. You know when you've been stung by a fire ant. You know you're getting it. So they have been an invasive species that have come in. I believe they came in from ships from Africa or something. They made their way over here. Look at the interesting like head, thorax. Look at that thorax and abdomen. Very interesting trunk that they have right there. And they tend to be reddish colored and not too large, not too small, but very prevalent around here. All right, Coleoptera. That's your next group. These are the horned wing beetles. Of the insect world, the beetles are the largest group. The largest order are found in Coleoptera. We can see a beetle right here. She's called a ladybird beetle, also known as ladybug. All right, and some other examples. Here she is opening up her elytra and sending out her wings right here, called the horned wings, and so she can fly. So we have a huge amount of diversity among the beetles. Some of the biggest insects are found in this group, like the Goliath beetle. They're massive. They're that big or so. Yeah, and they have that huge mandible. This is called the rhinoceros beetle. We've seen these guys around here. They're not as big as the Goliath. They're probably about that big. Very impressive, however.
Very strong.
And strong. We see these a lot, so they're the iridescent green, some sort of beetle. Sometimes when you see beetles in your garden, like this one, you know it's bad news. This guy is not a benefit to your garden, and so we spend some time trying to kill them or get them out of our garden. Typically, I'm trying to grow my garden organically, so I don't use poison on there, but there are some beneficial insects that actually will kill these guys or eat these guys. This guy is called a shield bug, and you've seen them. Have you seen one with a little wheel on the back of them? That's called a wheel bug, but it's in the shield bug family. They have sort of this X on their back right here. All of those are what are known as the stink bugs. And you know if you've come in contact with a stink bug. They have a very discerning stink. All right, next group, order Diptera. They have membranous wings. We're talking about gnats, flies, and mosquitoes. Gnats, flies, and mosquitoes. Mosquitoes, remember, are bugs. Flies, however, have that kind of sponging mouth that we looked at earlier. Okay. You can see here a mosquito with that piercing, sucking mouth that's going to pierce into you and suck up your blood. And they will bring it into their abdomen right there. And you can sometimes, you may have seen this before if you've been attacked by mosquitoes, and you see it and you slap it. Sometimes they're slow if their abdomen is really distended, and you leave a smear of blood, right? That's your blood. They collected it from you, and because that's what they're going to eat. Sometimes they can come and stab us, and we have a mosquito bite, we never even felt them. But later on, we have an itch, so we're like, oh no, I didn't even know. All right, next group, order Orthoptera. These are our leather-like wing creatures. It says leather-like wings covering the membranous wings. We'll see when we look at our grasshopper in just a little bit here if we can see those two different types of wings. Sometimes my specimens come in with them, and sometimes they don't. So they must use different types. So grasshoppers, cricket, cockroaches, praying mantises are all in this group. So Orthoptera. So this one's called the katydid. I've seen these around. They're very bright green. And I've seen one before that was very, very large. My son and I were on a walk, and we came up to it. It's beautiful, and we're looking at it like this, and I kind of poked it with my stick, and it screamed out at us, and it screamed, katydid, just like that. It sounded just like it said the word katydid. I don't know if that's true, but it sounded like it to us. We have the praying mantis here. The praying mantis is a beneficial insect. They eat aphids, and aphids are wrecking your plants in your garden. You can see a close-up. Remember, she's the one that does turn her head. The one of the only that can turn their head. This, once again, the little dot you can see in the middle right here, that's just an illusion. It's just the whole eye is the same. But notice on the top of her head, she has these little things up here called ocelli, and those ocelli have light. They can sense light as well. So she's a pretty sophisticated creature. They do put on shows. Right here is one putting on a show. I've seen them do this for me, and they'll just spread it out. And the reason they're doing that, a couple reasons. One is to make them look bigger than they are, to intimidate you and scare you off. The other one is to show off for a mate, to impress the female. You can tell the difference between the males and the females. The males are much smaller than the females. The females are quite large. All right, metamorphosis. In class Insecta, the organisms may experience complete metamorphosis that has 4 stages: egg, larva, pupa, adult. We see that in the butterfly. We see it also in the bee. We just don't see it as readily because it's down in the hive there. We also have incomplete metamorphosis, 3 stages, where we have the egg, the nymph, and the adult. And the nymph version right here looks like a miniature of the adult. Grasshoppers do this. The babies come out, looks like a little tiny grasshopper. I saw a little grasshopper this big in my garden, and I was furious because he's eating my plants. But here, our larval stage of the complete metamorphosis looks completely different than the adult version. So here's complete. We can see the larval stage looks like a caterpillar, and it comes through the rest of metamorphosis, and the adult looks completely different than the caterpillar, except, look, we have a little bit of the markings there, the colorings that are similar. Another difference between butterflies and moths is that butterflies form a chrysalis or a chrysalid, and moths spin a cocoon, which is a little different. So a silkworm is a moth that spins a cocoon, and we use the silk to make fabric from it. All right, you can see here comes our egg. It's going to hatch out. Here comes our hungry caterpillar. It's going to eat, get fat, attach itself someplace safe, form the chrysalid, and then the magic happens, and out comes a butterfly. It's pretty cool. You know, what causes that to happen? It's going to be DNA that causes that to happen, but it is kind of like magic going on in there. Mealworms go through complete metamorphosis, where they start like a mealworm. I actually have some mealworms over here, but these are not alive. These are salted and ready for you to have for like a nice snack if you'd like to eat one. I don't know if you're interested. Cheddar cheese flavored. You know that insects are a very good source of protein. And they end up being what's known as a darkling beetle. I don't know if you're aware of that, but they turn into a beetle. I do this metamorphosis with my younger classes. I've bought them like this, and we watch them go through the whole metamorphosis. The pupa is pretty cool. It forms this little bean-looking thing, and if you touch it, it moves around. Here's our incomplete metamorphosis. Here, our nymph looks like a very small version of the adult. Lots of molting going on between here and here. All right, so our grasshopper anatomy looks something like this. Like I said, the external anatomy is going to be more interesting than the internal anatomy. So these are what we're looking for: our head and thorax, cephalothorax, eye, antennae, the mouth, what kind of mouth parts. We're going to count the legs. We're going to see what kind of wings they have. We're going to check out the abdomen and see if we can find the spiracles, which you should be able to see those. So we're going to look for all that, and then we will cut them open. Okay, when we cut them open, we should see things like, it really looks like goo inside there, but we'll try to see if we can find the crop. That should be pretty obvious. and then probably won't be able to see this heart structure at all, but we'll see what kind of internal structure we can see. All right, phylum Echinodermata. Is that below now?
Yes.
Okay, Isaiah, wake up. Phylum Echinodermata. This was just added this year to your book. They never covered this, although I always did cover it because I couldn't stand to miss it out right here. So you can see a creature up there that belongs in this phylum. That's a sea star or starfish. Echinodermata means spiny skin. And this I have a starfish for us today too. Adult forms are marked by their radial or spherical symmetry depending on the size of their rays. They have projections that often contain nematocysts. Those are the stinging things. They can easily regenerate injured limbs. We know that about them. In fact, they are big predators of clams. And sometimes clam farmers, if they have an infestation of starfish, they get so angry they'll pull them up out of the water and cut them in half and throw them back in. Well, they've just made 2 starfish. So they had to learn to take the starfish out of the vicinity. All right, so here we go.
Literally just grab them and throw them in like a field.
Let them dry out.
Yeah.
Anatomy examples. Let's see, anatomy/examples. We have spiny skin, tube feet. I'll show you a couple of pictures of that in a minute. The tube feet is part of the vascular system. The tube feet, water vascular system. We have an example: starfish, sea cucumber, sand dollar, sea urchin. Their feeding strategies: they are carnivorous predators. Special structures would be their tube feet, and reproduction is gamete production. So this is kind of the pattern we were using for the first part of this module. All right, so we're looking at a starfish right here. They come in all sorts of colors and sizes, typically with 5 rays, but we saw that one in the original picture there with like 10 rays, right? Arms. There's another one. Here's one being held. That's real, you know, so they can be really, really quite beautiful. All right, so when we take a look, we're going to take a look at one of these guys today, okay? And we're going to see on why they're called Echinodermata. Remember, spiny skin. We're going to see kind of bumpy outer skin here, and then we'll see this thing on the top called the metaporite, and that's where they use that to help pull the water through. So we're going to see how they're going to pull the water through their system to allow their tube feet to give them I don't like to use the word suction, but a type of suction. It really is just water flow, and give them the ability to open up a clam that doesn't want to be opened up. Okay, so that's hard to do. You can see those right here, those little tubes going through this water vascular system that exits through the metaporite right here. We're going to find that metaporite, and then we're going to try to find some tube feet and everything. Okay, right here you can see the tube feet are in this softer part right here. Here's the spiny parts of the skin. We'll see this right here is the mouth of the starfish, and we've talked about this, right? How they open up the clam and they exude their stomach out of their body into the clam and digest it inside the clam, and then put the stomach back in.
So they don't have to open it as much.
So they they can just they don't have to try to get the whole thing into their mouth. They can put their mouth into it.
Which is terrifying.
It's terrifying, absolutely. Let's watch this guy. This is no sound on this one. You're just going to see
Big starfish.
on the side of an aquarium. You can see these little 2 feet moving right there. If you hold one in your hand, a living one in your hand, it kind of feels funny. They'll just walk across your hand like that.
No,
All right, and that's their little mouth part right there. Okay. All right, here's the
You
2
have a
feet
video of it
close
eating
up.
something?
Say again?
A video of it eating something?
I have a picture of it trying to eat a clam. Yeah.
YouTube.
You can see these little 2 feet right here. There's a little hole in there, right? This right here is going to be some frictional area to help hold on to something like. So they have the suction part of it, and then the grabbing part of it. Here's a really close-up picture of the end of one of those little 2 feet. Pretty sophisticated. And here you can see right here, they're like protractor muscles that are pulling that water through there. And when they do that, like that, then it holds onto that surface with quite a bit of strength. Another in this group would be a sea urchin. They have 2 feet as well. They have spines too. So interspersed between the spines, we'll see the little 2 feet. Didn't we look at one of these? I showed you the test, right? And you look through it. Where the holes were, those would have been the 2 feet, and where the bumps were, those would have been the spines. They look like that, remember?
Yes.
Yeah. And then and I told you the bigger ones, people make lamps out of them. Yeah, because there's holes in them. Yeah. When we look inside of those guys, you can see they're basically a round shell with a mouth on this end and then a gut and gonads on the inside. The most interesting thing about them is their mouth. It's kind of like it's called Aristotle's lantern, and it's sort of like a beak coming down, similar, not like the squid, but it's like 5 teeth that come down that eat that way. So they're pretty voracious eaters too. They like to eat kelp. All right, so remember safety with our dissections. We're going to take a look at a grasshopper and a starfish. And I thought I had one more thing.